Good evening, skeptics of the interwebs. I'm Alexa, the resident ooky spooky girly, and today we're diving into some of the less than truthful cases of Ed and Lorraine Warren. As a fan of their work, I always say that I believe half of it, and the other half was them making a living. Hey, as an actress myself, sometimes the show just has to go on. Question for y'all, what's your favorite Warren case? If it isn't obvious enough, Annabelle has been my girly since before she was famous, but let me know in the comments which case you're partial to. Also, welcome to the top 5 Ed and Lorraine Warren cases that turned out to be fake. Number 5, the White Lady hoax. Just so we all have the same context going into this, the White Lady is the name of the ghost that haunts the Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. Most locals believe her to be the ghost of Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, with Harriet herself passing soon after. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son and still wanders their final resting place searching him out. Other folks believe the White Lady is the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who killed her husband and later, herself, and is doomed to wander the graveyard. Her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent. She is a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. It seems as if she enjoys scaring the daylights out of the living, so my kind of girly. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over. Others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. Now, Ed Warren was obsessed with her and has gone on record, as being determined to capture footage of her on film. And once he was able to do so, he kept the tape for himself. Yeah, he hoarded that tape like it held the secrets to the universe, or like he was the US government with all the proof they have of alien life. He allowed a very select few people to view it while it was being held in his personal archives, and none were allowed to further analyze it on their own time. Now, since the passing of both Ed and Lorraine, their son-in-law Tony has released the footage in its entirety to YouTube. The tape shows an apparent white human figure moving behind some tombstones. Similar to videos of UFOs, Bigfoot, and the Loch Ness Monster, however, the figure is at that perfect distance and resolution so that a shape can be seen, but no details that could lead to definitive identification. A woman named Judith Penny, who claimed she helped Ed maintain his reputation as a ghost hunter, comes into play right here. So when he claimed to have captured the White Lady on tape in the summer of 1990, after allegedly camping out in the graveyard for a week, it was actually Judith being the mystical being spotted on tape, masking herself with a white sheet. So scary. About as scary as a poorly made Halloween costume. Number 4, the Snedeker case. Okay, so for the unaware, let's just run through the case as if it was real at first, just for funsies. One night, very late at night, Ed and Lauren were contacted by the family, who had just moved into a house on Meriden Avenue in Southington. Specifically, the mother of the family unit and a niece who came to stay with the family were on the phone. What they found and bought was a big and seemingly welcoming home, but what they allegedly didn't know was that it was a former funeral home. Oh, and fun fact, the morticians at the funeral home were allegedly involved in necrophilia, or performing acts with corpses. What used to be the showroom for the coffins was now the younglings room, just down the hall. Oh, and just down the hall, the place where bodies were prepared for viewing. So the boys were the first to start talking about things they had seen and experienced, saying they were terrified, and the parents chastised them at first for it, but they were so scared that they started sleeping on the floor in the living room. Among the sounds the boys would hear were the sounds of chains pulling the coffins upstairs. Only thing was, there was no coffins. So the woman who called were terrified, with the niece in a small bedroom in the back of the house, and the covers on her bed tended to levitate around her, like there was a fan blowing them around. Lorraine said that while the mother was on the phone with her, even more bizarre events started happening. So the mother had rosary beads in her hand, and while she spoke, the beads were actually being pulled apart and falling to the floor. So Lorraine and Ed went over the next morning with the family's parish priest. A blessing of the house seemed to do nothing to calm things down, and that's when the Warrens decided to call the bishop's office in Hartford. The church eventually sent an exorcist, which seemed to do the trick, but not before one last hurrah from whatever was believed to be haunting the house, because demons don't like to give up without a fight. So there was this huge tree in front of the house, and half of the tree, with no wind, broke off and fell on the property. So when it came time to publish the story of what happened, who did Ed and Lorraine bring in to help them write the book? Ray Garton, an author well known for writing fictional horror. In the years since, he has very publicly claimed that everything to do with the case was bunk. When Ray found that the family couldn't keep their individual stories straight, he went to Ed, and the man of the hour simply just said, all the people who come to him and Lorraine are crazy. That's why they come to them. Just use what you can and make the rest up. You write scary books, right? Well, make it up and make it scary. That's why we hired you. If that wasn't damning enough right there, apparently the boys, the center of this entire mess, were nowhere to be found. Ray never met them in person and was only allowed to talk to them briefly on the phone, but as soon as one of the boys started telling Ray that the things he saw in the house went away after he'd been medicated, the mom abruptly ended the conversation. The Warrens repeatedly told Ray they had videotapes of actual supernatural activity shot in the house, and they were going to show it to him while he was there, but they never did. Lorraine never saw the inside of the house because the people living there at the time wanted absolutely nothing to do with this circus and claimed there were no problems at all in the house. The Warrens explained that this was because the house had been cleansed, by a priest who had performed an exorcism, but to the best of Ray's knowledge, the Catholic Church had absolutely nothing to do with the Warrens in any official way, and there are actually questions about the legitimacy of the priests who worked with them. So remember how the family claimed they had no idea the house was a former funeral home until they, moved in? Turns out nearly everyone in that neighborhood knew it was a former funeral home. It was no secret. The supernatural problems in the house didn't start until the landlord, frustrated after months of being unable to get rent out of the family, made moves to have them evicted, and then all of a sudden the house was infested with demons. What a coincidence. Apparently there have been no problems in that house since. Number 3, fraudulent items in their museum. So Ed and Lorraine were investigating numerous cases from the 1950s until they passed, right? And they founded a whole society devoted to the research and investigation of the paranormal in 1952, not to forget their entire museum dedicated to objects from their cases. So explain to me how their website only has 10 public case files and why so much from their museum looks like leftovers from a Spirit Halloween. Doesn't anyone else find it pretty suspicious that we only get details from the really big news cases, while artifacts from other lesser cases are barely a footnote and have no story or witnesses attached? So apparently, in one corner of the Warrens Occult Museum, there's the skin of a tiger that is said to have killed 33 people in India while possessed by a demonic spirit. But when I tried to research this weird tiger, I found no account of any reportings in history about such a case, or any offers from Ed and Lorraine to go into detail about any events leading to how it came into their possession. Seriously, look at some of that stuff. Given what I know about modern day Satanism, that idol looks like a papier-mâché alien mock-up. Heck, most folks who practice Satanism don't actually pray to any sort of idol, or to the devil himself. But sure, for a moment I'll pretend that's real, and move on to the black magic skull, which just looks like a cheap haunted house prop for a glow-in-the-dark room. Ditto for the chilling masks. Actually, that's a lie. I've seen cosplayers make better masks. I'm not even gonna try to rationalize the skull with horns, or the recreation of the Witch of Monroe. Y'all don't need to see me fuming right now. Okay. One last thing. Apparently the Warrens have a vampire coffin from a modern day vampire they claim to have met. Anyone want to explain to me how they couldn't get hard evidence from a vampire, but they could get his coffin? That sounds a lot harder, and that's coming from a self-proclaimed expert on vampire lore. Number 2, the Enfield Poltergeist. So the events of the Enfield Poltergeist case began in August of 1977, shortly after the Warrens investigated the Amityville haunting. The case centered mostly around young Janet Hodgson, who was allegedly tormented and possessed by a poltergeist. The evil spirit was responsible for knocking sounds, strange voices, growling, levitation, throwing objects around the room. The usual stuff. The story became a media sensation and led to numerous investigations of Janet, her sister Peggy, and their home. Now, over the years, the haunting's authenticity has come into question, partly because much of the paranormal activity occurred only when Peggy and Janet were present. Audio recordings and photographs taken during nearly 2 years of investigations have also been scrutinized. Even Janet herself admitted to fabricating a small portion of the events that took place in the home. The classic photo of Janet levitating above her bed that's often used to prove the legitimacy of the case could easily be Janet jumping. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that she's not hovering in midair. People will reproduce that image at home, jumping up and down on a bed. Also, if anybody out there remembers the cover poster for the High School Musical franchise, it easily proves that that pose can be replicated by just jumping up and down on the ground. As for the Warrens' part in the investigation, they played only a small role in the case, despite the events depicted in The Conjuring 2. Apparently, the Warrens were initially denied access to the house and ended up only staying for 1 day, even though they cited it as one of their most famous cases. Number 1, Werewolf Exorcism. Alongside Catholic bishops and retired police officers, Ed and Lorraine Warren claimed that they exorcised the angry spirit of a werewolf from a man named Bill Ramsey, who, would reportedly turn into a wolfman. Previously, Ramsey had been arrested for accosting officers, which he attributed to a werewolf demon overtaking him. So Lorraine claimed that she saw his case on TV while she and Ed were visiting England, and she felt that, she could help the man. She even stated that she had a video of Ramsey transforming, but she has never released this video to the public. Golly gee, where have I heard that statement before? Kind of curious how Ed and Lorraine always claim to have all these videos of proof, but the only one that's made its way to the public eyes post-mortem hasn't proved anything about any of the cases. The Warrens went so far as to bring Ramsey back to Connecticut so they could perform an exorcism alongside Bishop Robert McKenna, who was reportedly experienced in exorcising spirits. What's most interesting about this case, however, is that it both demonstrates, the Warrens' fraudulent nature and shows how blindly faithful and devoted believers of their work can be. Consider this passage, okay? The Warrens haven't been able to produce any photos or material evidence, but the very presence of the famous demonologist couple, paranormal collector John Zaffis and famous exorcist bishop greatly increases the credibility. However, most resources, touting the truthfulness of this case are just blogs that really love to gush about the Warrens. The Warrens eventually detailed the case in their book, Werewolf, A True Story of Demonic Possession, which one review notes that it contained no actual documentation of the case. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I hope today provided some clarification for everyone on not everything being true. If you enjoyed today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell for more Warren content from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.